It's really interesting as I can reflect on it. I keep my distance from it right now just for my own well-being.
So, okay, y'all, we seriously need to talk about what's going on with Meghan Markle and these taxpayer funds because, listen, sources inside the House of Lords are saying that a confidential financial audit was quietly handed over to King Charles. Now, I know every time Meghan's name pops up in headlines, it's easy to assume it's just gossip, right? But this isn't some tabloid rumor or anonymous royal insider drama. We're talking about an actual report, part of a larger financial review of royal spending, something that's been building behind the scenes for a while now. The report allegedly focuses on Meghan's time as a working royal and, shockingly, what she might have spent even after stepping down. And get this, some of the expenses flagged in the audit, they go well beyond 2020, which is when Meghan and Harry were supposed to be financially independent. That's what they told the public, but the numbers say something else entirely. We're talking taxpayer-funded security costs, travel, staff wages, and even upgrades to luxury residences overseas after the so-called royal exit. And honestly, once this report landed on King Charles's desk, the tone inside the palace shifted fast. Because if even a fraction of these numbers are accurate, we're looking at a full-on scandal tied to public fund. This isn't just Meghan's PR problem. It could turn into a royal headache fast.
And when you've been through any level of pain or trauma, I believe part of our healing journey, certainly part of mine, is being able to be really open about it.
So here's where the story really kicks off. Deep inside the palace, there comes a very quiet handoff of a red folder marked confidential. That folder was a full financial audit, and it didn't just show up out of nowhere. According to insiders, this thing had been building behind the scenes for months, and where did it end up? Right on King Charles's desk. Now, let's be real for a second. Why would they keep this so quiet if there was nothing serious in it? That alone tells you something's up. If this was just a routine check or some minor accounting issue, they'd have handled it through back channels. But this went straight to the top. And this audit didn't just focus on Meghan and Harry's time inside the royal system. It actually dug into what happened after they left, which is a pretty big deal. Because let's not forget, when they stepped down, they promised the public they'd be financially independent. Remember that? That was the whole thing. They even made public statements about no longer relying on royal funds or taxpayer money. But this audit seems to suggest otherwise. From what's being said, it uncovered multiple transactions tied to Meghan, and some even post-2020, after Meghan was official. These weren't just leftovers from old budgets. We're talking about new charges, international security costs, private flights, staff salaries, even luxury home upgrades, and some of those expenses came through channels connected to the Crown estate, which means public money may have been involved, even after they left royal life. Now just think about that for a second. If you tell the world you're done taking money, but someone finds receipts that say otherwise, yeah, not a good look. And this brings us into what's honestly the most jaw-dropping part, because the report says that some of these charges kept showing up for months after their exit. They were labeled post-transition expenses, which sounds innocent enough until you realize that includes luxury flights, high-end rentals, private security bills, and even interior design stuff for properties outside the UK. Let's break that down for a second. Most people are out here budgeting for groceries and gas, and meanwhile, you're finding out you might have helped cover security costs for a Montecito mansion? Yeah. That's where public outrage comes in. It's not just about the money, it's about the principle. Because when everyday taxpayers are being told one story, but the receipts say something else, that gap is where trust breaks down. And speaking of reaction, let's talk about Meghan's.
What was hard to get over was being blamed for something that not only I didn't do, but that happened to me.
According to palace insiders, Meghan did not see this coming. In fact, the moment she found out how deep this audit went, she allegedly broke down during a private video call with her legal and PR teams. Now, here's the thing. Some people might wonder, how could she not know this would come back around? But honestly, it sounds like she really thought this was all in the past. that the palace had moved on, that maybe by cutting ties and moving across the world, the paper trail would just fade. But what she might have underestimated is just how deep royal accounting goes. These people document everything. This is the same institution that tracks the value of royal spoons. You think they're not tracking private jet costs? Apparently. Meghan kept asking during that call, how did they get access to everything? Which tells you she probably didn't realize just how much they still had visibility over, or maybe she thought the structure around those expenses was enough to keep things blurred. Either way, when someone opens a 3-year-old spreadsheet and sees a charge marked residence redecoration linked back to royal funds, it's not gonna fly. And if you're sitting there thinking, this feels a bit dramatic, just imagine it was you. You thought you cleaned up all your mess, moved on, rebranded, built a whole new image, and then suddenly someone pulls out a receipt with your name on it from 3 years ago, linked to money that wasn't supposed to be touched. You'd be freaking out too.
So if me voicing what I have overcome will save someone, or asks or encourage someone in their life to really genuinely check in on them and not assume that the appearance is good so everything's okay, then that's worth it. I'll take a hit for that.
So here's where things start getting even more serious, because now it's not just a royal family situation anymore. Parliament is stepping in, and when they get involved, it's no longer just behind the scenes whispers. Reports say members of Parliament are demanding answers, like, where exactly did the money go? Who signed off on these payments? And why were funds still being spent after Meghan and Harry walked away from their roles? These aren't casual questions. They're the kind that come before hearings and public accountability. And look, this makes sense. That's literally their job. Parliament is responsible for making sure public money is being used properly, and when it looks like royal funds, which come from taxpayers, might have been misused or mishandled, of course they're gonna start asking tough questions. They'd be doing the public a disservice if they didn't. Now, here's the part that really stings for a lot of people. The public was told very clearly that Meghan and Harry were done taking taxpayer funds. That was the whole point of their big financial independence message. That's why the public backed off and let them do their thing in the US. But if it turns out that money was still flowing, even quietly, that's betrayal for a lot of folks. Some MPs are even pushing for a full inquiry. Others are calling for a policy change that would require all royal financial activity involving public money to be disclosed in the future. It's being called the Royal Financial Transparency Push, and you already know the palace isn't loving that idea. Now let's shift gears, because according to sources close to the review, several of the flagged transactions weren't just tied to Meghan. They were marked with joint beneficiary labels, meaning both Meghan and Harry were listed. That changes things, because Harry has always painted this narrative that he cut ties, that he was no longer a working royal, that he wasn't getting any support. But if he's linked to the same taxpayer-funded spending, that whole story starts to feel a little off. So the question becomes, was he unaware of where the money was coming from? Or was he fully involved and just hoping no one would notice? Because these weren't small charges. We're talking big-ticket items: security, travel, living expenses, things that don't just go unnoticed. And honestly, if both of them were still receiving royal length support after their exit, then that whole "we're self-made now" image starts to look more like a carefully crafted narrative than a reality. But here's where things get real, because Meghan and Harry aren't just royals anymore, they're brands. They've got deals, they've got production companies, media projects, lifestyle products, and all of that relies on one thing: public trust. And right now, that trust is cracking. Word is one of Meghan's upcoming projects just got put on pause. The reason? A creative realignment, which is Hollywood speak for, we're trying to figure out how to deal with this mess before we go forward. And she's not the only one feeling the tension. A couple of fashion brands that were closely linked to her are rethinking their partnerships. Nothing dramatic yet, but things are going quiet, which in this industry says everything. Because let's be honest, what brand wants to stand behind someone being accused of misusing public money? That's a PR nightmare. especially when your whole image is built around empowerment, social justice, and doing good. Think about it. You're trying to position someone as a role model, and then a report drops suggesting they may have used taxpayer money for luxury flights and private security after promising they'd stop? That's not inspirational, that's damaging. So, yeah, this isn't just about money anymore, it's about credibility. And for people like Meghan and Harry, once your credibility starts slipping, the whole brand starts to shake.
It didn't make sense to not be just doing what everyone else was doing, which was trying to be supportive, knowing what was going on with my dad and whatnot.
Now, here's where it gets spicy. There's been serious buzz, not just from social media, but from actual royal insiders, that Meghan's titles could be on the chopping block. The Duchess of Sussex might not be around much longer if this mess gets any worse. And no, this isn't some random internet rumor started by a royal fan account. Multiple sources close to the palace are saying that advisors have quietly started conversations about whether it's time to strip the titles altogether. And honestly, from their point of view, it makes sense, because if Meghan is now tied to this financial scandal, especially one involving taxpayer money, then keeping the titles attached to her becomes a liability. The palace is all about image, tradition, and protecting the crown, and if the public starts seeing that title as a symbol of misuse instead of dignity, it's game over. There's also the pressure from Parliament. If lawmakers keep pushing for accountability and the press keeps digging, then the palace might have to make a move just to calm things down. Let's be real, removing a title isn't something they do lightly. It hasn't happened much in recent history, but when royal money and public trust are involved, the stakes are different. Some insiders say it might come down to a simple calculation. Is keeping her a bigger risk than letting her go? And now, I want to ask y'all, what do you think? Should Meghan lose her Duchess title? Or would it be enough if she and Harry just paid back the money and issued a statement? Because either way, something has to give. The palace can't just stay silent if the heat keeps rising.